The opinions expressed in the following are those of its participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the producers and the Six Talk Podcast Network. Also, the following contains mature material and mild language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
Well, here we go on this Saturday afternoon, July 6, 2019, and we want to try and get this done rather quickly today because there are other plans, but I think Kevin wanted to get donuts. Thanks.
Well, it was more like Mohamed wanted to get donuts.
Come on, guys.
Well, here, so
this is for the first time ever we're on a timer.
we're
It's like this time we're literally cutting for time.
well, no, we're not going to really cut for time, but we are in a bit of a there. I guess I had other stuff to do today, so
Instead of games done quick, podcasts done quick.
well, yeah, something like that. So the usual around the table: Mike Nicolas, James Austin, Kevin Ng, Mohamed Sharmarke, all around the table. Well, it's been a busy day. We've all had stuff to do. I mean, Kevin had a test. I have an appointment later. Long story. Mo went to see a movie. How was Spider-Man, by the way?
It was good.
And James was just doing other stuff. What were you doing today? I think you're the only one who has nothing.
Well, no,
going
I
on.
was resting because I've been so busy during the week and stuff.
Yes.
And then I had other things I wanted to do, but you called me last night, and then I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch this anymore. I actually have to get sleep or I'm going to keel over. So
Yeah, and it was just one of those things. Well, let's see. We didn't get an episode in June because that's
we
just
had
the way June
like
went.
many in May.
We did those
so that
4 tapings in May.
and that was kind of like to give us enough breathing room. But
For now, yeah. I mean, we're still letting the after effects of Anime North. Some of us are still like I'm still suffering a little bit of post-convention syndrome.
that's a long time to suffer.
In terms
there,
of
Mike.
missing Anime North, or
Just recovering from it.
I think you should say.
And I didn't
like,
see
you
him
should have been more
nearly as much.
respectful and said post holiday recovery syndrome.
Oh,
because
yeah,
Canada Day weekend.
And the Canada
and so
Day
on.
weekend.
I
yeah.
remember being 16 and thinking, "Oh man, like Anime North's over. What am I going to do with my life?" Yeah, I just don't care anymore.
No. It's just one of those. We're gonna look back a little bit.
Oh man, there's the Wendy's thing, a $5 bag. We could have got that for you there, Kevin.
Yeah.
You were in the States,
Yeah.
you guys got it.
And
Yeah, but not here.
yeah,
It's fine.
Well,
We had to go to Buffalo, but hey, the walk would be worth it in all this heat.
oh boy. Well, yeah, and it's we're straddling 30 degrees Celsius here in Toronto, just for reference. There's a bit of a
120 for you Americans.
it's closer to like mid 80s.
I had to break out the linen.
Mid to
least-
high 80s.
Sure, I swear it feels like it's 120.
At least it's not as bad as what Europe was going
Like,
through a while
yeah.
back, because they were going for extreme heat.
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man would have been sweltering in that heat. I don't think he'd win.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, as I said, we're more than a month after Anime North, and we're still. I'm still digesting a lot of it. I think for this episode, I want to look back a little bit on some of the key top things we did at Anime North, and then obviously there's some news, a little bit more talk and more recent ends, and that's the other part we'll talk about in the back end of the show. And we're not going to take a break. We're going to try and tape this all in one take.
One take, guys. One take.
Yeah, and don't forget, try and stay close to the mic.
Absolutely. One take, guys.
Okay, so well, let's talk. Well, I mean, there are two things.
Remember to use all your swear words.
A few things I want to talk about from Anime North and I know Mohamed may not be able to offer too much,
Sorry, guys. Next year for sure.
but no, he'll offer something a lot more later.
I will
on.
hold you to this, Mohamed.
Oh God, no.
So here's I'll give some thoughts. Where obviously the big thing we did with at Anime North was interview Fred Schott, which was
Sir Frederick of the Shot.
yes. Well, we can call he is basically like in terms of fandom, old school royalty to old school fans, right?
And it had been a long time since he had been to Anime North, and he had a lot of recollections to share with us, as I'm sure you might have listened.
Yeah, if anybody listened to the interview we did with him, there's a little bit more to that story and to the background. And yes, if you listen to the interview, we did preview what would have been his last panel, and we'll talk about that actually too. Well, his first two panels, as we mentioned, he talked about the Four Immigrants manga at length, and the follow-up and what's basically happened in the years since he published the book, because that book's been on the market, was published back in 98, actually, around the time of his first appearance at Anime North. Obviously, a lot of things have happened in the 20 years since. As I said, we can talk about that in the interview. That was the first panel. Second panel, he talked at length about his friendship, about Astro Boy and his friendship with Osamu Tezuka, which I missed the back end of because I had to be off to do the podcast panel at Anime North. Like I said, it's Anime North. You're going to miss stuff. There's a lot of things you'll want to do.
You were there for the first half. I was there for the second half, so we can kind of work it together.
Yeah, we can kind of work it together. Well,
and we mentioned some things in his interview about that one. The picture of, well, not the Crown Prince, but the Emperor now.
You saw that picture. I did not.
And he talks about that. Yeah.
He talks about seeing that picture, and obviously he talked about the recollection in that in the interview itself.
And meeting the Crown Prince then
meeting Naruhito and those pictures.
And his friendship with Osamu Tezuka and the difference, like he was talking about how he was learning about the outside world through Fred and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like now all the creators are either on Twitter or they have the internet, so they can get an idea of what the outside world is thinking of them outside Japan and stuff like that. And you didn't have that way back in the day when there was no internet, nothing like that. So he was getting a lot of the foreignness and the ideas through Fred and stuff like that. Through Fred. And they had very long discussions, as he said in the panel. He said he was in, I think they were coming up to Canada, ironically. And they missed the flight in San Francisco because they were so engrossed in their conversation. Because it was a
really funny story.
I had a good chuckle on that one.
When you've heard the interview already? Okay, what did you think of it? Just quickly.
Enlightening.
Oh, geez, that doesn't sound all that great.
No, it was a fun listen.
Okay, as I said, I didn't want to get I've known Fred and been in touch with him all through those 20 years.
And we
were talking. Obviously, the conversation was more between old friends, right?
And it was funny. The other one, thinking about it on that wavelength, is the manga. I forget who did it, but it was of Osamu Tezuka's life.
Oh yeah,
and the one thing was he showed the one panel where it's they have the foreigner, and the foreigner was basically Fred shot because they took a tracing almost of this one picture. He showed the picture of him and Tezuka in this thing in the room and stuff. It was kind of interesting.
And that was basically his design.
Yeah, that was basically they just put Fred and mangafied him.
When you told me about seeing things through foreigners' eyes, it made me think a little bit about the creator of Love Hina, Ken Akamatsu, and he talked a little bit about when he found out about Love Hina's popularity outside of Japan for the first time, when he was exposed to it for the first time, and how floored he was by it, and how he'll keep in mind his foreign audience as he continues writing. So that you brought up,
I'm guessing that's why we got manga Harry Potter then later on.
I suppose, yeah. But it was it's just how times have changed, right?
Negima's great.
It is, but it definitely has its time and place. You know what I mean? You can tell where it's kind of from in a way.
But then it ended. It did not end very well. But
yeah,
although you could say
it had a great start and then it just petered out. It felt like.
Well, you could say it continued, but in any case.
Anyway, so going back to Tezuka and the interview and Tezuka and Shot in the interview, the other thing was. At the time we were doing the interview, we had planned out the interview, and we found out, the interview was going to happen, and I was gonna get the office display room to be able to do the interview. You hinted to me, James, that you weren't going to initially sit in on the interview.
Well, I wasn't sure where I was going to be at that point in time because there are just so many things to do at Anime North, and then I guess at some point I'm like, I can do this, so I said I would join you. And I think it solidified once I started hearing the second panel and stuff like that. You know what? I should come and sit in on that. And kind of worked its way out.
I would have loved to sit in, but I had my responsibilities.
But then, because if I hadn't been there, I probably would have went over to the TCC. But I went after the fact, which was it worked out. But it was when the torrential downpour came, so we got a bit wet. And then we went in, and then it passed over, and then I was able to dry off as I walked back.
Yeah. Well, it was more of Like, how do I explain the whole?
But let's just say you've never seen cosplayers run so fast in their life.
Oh, yeah.
To get away from like this torrential.
But I was just surprised that you ultimately decided to to sit in on it, and that added another element. It was, as I said, it's easily,
and we got a lot done in that short amount of time. I think.
Yeah,
and it was also nice because, as you said, and we said it in the interview, that it's all glass, so we got to see all the people going back and forth through that one entranceway, the hallway.
Yeah, it was
of the.
It was
whatever the hotel we want to call. I was going to say DoubleTree for.
I was so happy to have had Fred sit down. Like, I mean, I can't say that enough. How much of that was a thrill to have done that. So
yeah, no, I think it was a great thing for both of us and stuff like that. And you don't always get those opportunities, and so he was very gracious with his time and stuff like that because he had a lot of panels to do and a lot of things, and he's older now. You know what I mean? So
because maybe who knows how many more times you'll be able to see Anime North. Actually, in the course of this, and I guess we'll come back to this when at another point. And I know I want to talk to Kevin a little bit more about his his experience at Anime North a little bit more, but I don't think we'll be able to today anyway.
That's okay.
Like maybe he doesn't want to talk about it.
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, cool.
We don't need to.
You didn't burn down the hotel. We were all still alive after, so it must have been okay.
So the other thing is we did preview Fred's third panel, which was his take on manga translation today, and talking with you guys over the phone last week as we were starting to plan the episode. I told you some of the stories, and I actually took notes as the panel happened. It was on Sunday afternoon. Basically, this was a little bit more of Fred's own story. As a translator, and he
is of that generation that you remember the old Dana Lewis and all those guys from Dark Horse and stuff like that. They were like a different generation than what it became in the early 2000s with Tokyo Pop, as you're about to get into.
Yeah, when we talked about the story, right? And I'm going to read my notes verbatim, and then maybe I'll elaborate on them. Started reading, and this is Fred again. Mentioned that he started reading manga in the early 70s. Now, it must be noted he went to places when he was younger. I think and I forgot exactly where he said he lived, but he lived overseas quite a bit when he was younger. So he was already quite well traveled by the time the whole manga scene kind of came in. Was a fan of Leiji Matsumoto, so Galaxy Express, I think, right?
Yes, Captain Harlock.
Yeah. One of his friends, Suichi Okada, introduced Phoenix to him. So that was his actual first exposure to real initial exposure to Tezuka. And he hinted when they first met Tezuka, it wasn't Astro Boy that was the focus for them that day. It was Phoenix. They were trying to get the rights to translate Phoenix. Yeah, and how his company at the time, like the partnership they had for the translating company, how they got it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. That story. That's the story, right? Like how he made a translating company with a couple of other friends. So a fellow American and two other Japanese, and it was through that group that he met Tezuka. At the time, and we talk a lot about flipped and unflipped manga. He said, I wrote down the words unflopped, not possible at time, or unthinkable. So,
and we had a long discussion about that, Mike, and it's the same we've talked about many times before, where they were trying to do it for the foreign audience, and we were used to it a certain way. So they're like, okay, we have to flip it back to their reading style, and then it can affect us. Yeah. We know the artwork, and then there was the other thing of sometimes we were used to all color American comics. So they're like, oh, we had to worry about that. And remember, Viz did the Crying Freeman editions, one of the first ones. They were all in color and they were flipped. And those are some unique editions.
Yeah. Well, and then thought it was too early to translate manga in late 70s. Believed more in writing books than manga at the time. And he reminded us, and in the course of the panel, and I know you're watching the Overwatch game, a reminder that Japanese imports of U.S. comics, of American comics in the early 20th century was more of was Western orientation, so left to right. He touched again on the For Immigrants manga and then Europe. And he did translate Rose of Versailles. There were a couple different versions of translations, but he was in on those.
Yeah, that's
So-
interesting that like we've had the anime come out, but no one's touched the manga yet, even though the anime is now on a print.
No,
again.
doesn't Udon have the license to it, but for whatever reason hasn't put it out yet?
Did they?
It's-
Oh,
I don't
that's
know.
interesting. I can't remember.
I'm gonna double check that.
Anyway,
Anyway,
sometime in localization, things had to be really Americanized, even redrawn or retitled. I think that was his story about why Rose of Versailles got redone a couple times.
and we've seen that happen with other things. I remember Blade of the Immortal. That's one that Dark Horse worked with the artists, and they had like special covers and all this stuff because sometimes it didn't even correlate to the manga volumes and stuff like that. And that was with other ones they had done.
That always made me wonder because they still have not unflipped it to this day.
Well, yeah, unfortunately for that, the new omnibus for that one, they're still that way. And it looks like the other omnibus they're starting with next year, What is Michael, the cat manga, that one is going to be done 2 volumes, but it's going to be the flipped version and stuff like that. And that from Dark Horse was 11 volumes. Kodansha's Japanese version was 9 volumes.
Yeah.
They have some precedent for unflipping that.
But I don't mind.
Sorry, they have some precedent for keeping it flipped, I mean.
But a lot of them for that stuff, I don't mind. It's like the quality of the manga is still there, regardless. There are some things where, yeah, sometimes it might, but most of the time, flipping it isn't a big issue. But we're now where we are now.
Yes.
So.
And just to confirm, yes, Udon does still have the Rose of Versailles manga.
Well, it must have been a long time ago then that we might have talked about it.
There's a snag. That's why it's not out yet. There has to be some sort of snag.
We'll talk about snags later on, I'm sure.
Anyway, so you were continuing on.
Jokingly refers to himself as a survivor, which of the whole of the translating industry. I mean, wire to wire, he's been around.
Yeah, with the old school. Yeah, I know some of the ones like Torrance Smith and stuff like that. God rest his soul, unfortunately, but he was there. He was a lifer too.
Yeah, he actually went into some technical details about some things you can't flop, right? Like especially when it comes to orientation, hand positioning. If you tried to
or as we said, remember where they're driving on one side on one,
Yeah,
then they
and-
flip it, then it looks, but
so
not as many
awkward.
people off.
Yeah, so
I
hand
think
like that.
it
That's
might have been Gunsmith Cats. Like they showed that and it's like, oh, it's like you don't think about, but sometimes people read so quick.
yeah. But that all said, he still sound like there was a case for flop that at a time, but I suppose it just came and went. He tries to draw the line between adaptation and translation, and cites. Or I wrote down Ranma 1/2, but I think we can talk about a lot of in a Viz context as well, like the way they kind of adapted things so that so people can get the jokes in another language. And I know we're going to talk about translations. This will be a running theme throughout the
And
remainder
then
of this hour.
it's still like a thing that happens to this day. And the other thing of, okay, where is this actually taking place? Is it a more Japanese context? So then they start adding the chans and the senpai and the kohai and all that. So you have all sorts of things, but the audience has developed so much that they can use that a lot more than they used to.
Yeah. Well, I
it's
mean,
a
on the
weird
topic
thing.
of adaptation versus translation, I wrote the note: visual gags sometimes hard to translate, especially Japanese puns. So, that's
Definitely,
that's an
they
interesting
definitely
point.
still have issues with that one. So sometimes.
One note I wrote was Ghost of the Shell, peak of localization, but we've also referred to Astro Boy as last kick at the can for real for flopping, the flopping style, right? And
And I think the one that was omnibus for the Astro Boy, which he did do for Dark Horse, the omnibus is still flipped and stuff like that. That was the same thing in that. So,
yeah,
but
and
it's still it's all out there. So if you want a quality manga translated by Fred, like he did a great job on Astro Boy and any others.
yeah, likes written font over typed font. I think there's something to be said about that, but that's like I take another angle on it. Just writing in a book instead of typing out words and stuff on a computer. There's still something interesting about using pen and paper, and I guess in its presentation, that's probably the same thing. I think anybody who can read actual handwriting probably gets things a little better, or can process the words a lot better. Oh, and the last couple points, and this is the one we talked about over the phone. I put the words non-flopping, not so much authentic, but from mangaka demands and financial practicality. Remember, I told you, Fred. Like he talked a little bit about the last part when Tokyo Pop came on the scene, and talked about the whole marketing of Tokyo Pop and
100%
the 100% authentic marketing campaign. And he just thought it's a little bit. He thought that was just clever. He used
It was
the
the
exact word was
DJ Milky Stu
he
Levy
used
style, as they
yeah,
say.
it was-
He did the
It was
bus.
clever.
He did the bus reality show. Remember?
He called it.
Tokyo Pop 1.0.
I think the word I would use is clever when he talks about it in context. He used I remember the word snookered, and that's the word I wrote down. I remember writing that down. But it was just because, as I said,
And it was
Japanese author demands, and financial practicality. When you think about it.
And it was price point too, don't forget, because they went for the $9.99 American price point. And remember, they used to be a lot more expensive. Like now, manga prices are creeping back to where they used to be in the 90s,
yep.
which
was $16.99 American, all that
It's
other
a little
stuff.
bit much, yeah. But then again,
We're now at around $14.99 for some of the series and stuff like
Yeah. Cheapest ones are around $13 for Viz stuff.
that. Yeah.
so better or worse, I guess. But when we thought about it, I mean, I know you when I brought up that line that like the whole authentic thing was a bit on the misleading side, because really, like, you make it sound, it made it sound like Tokyo Pop went to the effort to put it that way.
But they didn't really.
But
have to do
really,
anything.
really, all they just ended up doing was just
And they had less
double
effort.
checking the words.
And they had less effort because they didn't do the sound effects as well. And that was the one thing that annoyed, for certain manga, a lot of us. Like, I look at Dragon Head, and it's a horror manga, and they didn't translate all the sound effects, and there were certain panels where you needed that ambiance, those sound effects, to get into the manga, and they just weren't translated. So you're like, I think I know what that means, but you're just seeing the sound effects with no translation
Kevin,
on a
Kevin,
black
I know how to feel.
page.
Kevin, I know kind of when I said that line, he had a bit of a aha or laughed almost.
He's laughing
when we were
now.
talking.
It's a little
about it.
disingenuous of Tokyo Pop, yes.
That's probably it, and that's sort of the gist I got.
But hey, look what it did.
Well, yeah, and this is the last line. I mean, this is the good part.
You just need the right lines,
but
the right
it proved
sizzle.
the flexibility of how much fandom had evolved. It proved the flexibility of Western fans.
And he was able to get it into the big book distributors and stuff like that. Like, I think it was like Kurt Hassler was with Borders at that point. Now
But
he's
it
with
also
Young Press,
started another
but-
but it also started another chain of events ultimately that led to the collapse of the industry about a decade
But
ago,
yeah,
too.
they were slower than the anime, but they're back on their feet again. And
We're getting
now,
somewhere, but
Well, there are things now. I was looking at the announcements on AX, and the thing that's still surprising, I told you before, is light novels way more are being released now, more than ever physically. And the other thing I've been noticing this year is Yuri manga has been being released way more physically than ever before, and they had even more Yuri announcements. And
That trend's been going on for a while now, though.
Sorry?
It's been going on for a while now in terms of Yuri.
But for the last decade, like last few years, yes. But it's interesting that last decade, Seven Seas tried it with Strawberry Line and their light novel line, and they didn't even survive 2 releases. Like, it was that dire. And now somehow they found the market, and maybe it's like anime tie-ins and all this other stuff, but they've definitely found a healthy niche, I guess.
so that's the basics of the last panel, of Fred's last panel. And is it vague? Do I make it sound vague and kind of pieced together? Oh yeah, but it was like, it's one of those things you should always, like, if you get this a chance, these are always fascinating panels, right? I mean, there's always the fan stuff and all that thing. But remember, Anime North, and one of its great powers is you end up learning something.
Yeah, like, of all the conventions and stuff like that, and maybe it's more of an East Coast thing, as we say, but we definitely have a lot more on the East Coast where you have those panels where they have historical panels and stuff tied to anime that you learn a lot more. You know what I mean?
I
It's
refer to
more
it-
academic.
Yeah, I refer to it as more intelligent discussion, if not academic.
And you don't see those as much at more the commercially driven ones, like the one in April that we talked about.
And great segue, because that's almost the vice and virtue of Anime North. Well, if you listen to episode 12, I mean, episode 11. This is episode 12. We had Jesse Betteridge on, the host of the Xanon Canada podcast, and one of the great anime commentators in Canada. He's kept up with this industry, and expressed that for long as long as I can remember being involved in fandom myself. And the man is younger than me. It was a pleasure meeting him. I can't say that enough too. Having him do the show on right after that evening for episode 11 was a real thrill, because we got an outsider, like a non-Torontonian's take on Anime North, certainly from a non-regular visitor. I know Toronto's down in that game against Atlanta in the Overwatch lead. Well, that was expected, but obviously he went on his little rant, I guess. I won't say a rant, but he certainly gave his opinion about the show. I like the word. I like the duct tape metaphor he used.
Very apt.
I'd say so. I think that's a fair thing to say. But then, as you know, Norm made his annual visit to the show on the podcast, and
for the second
when you talk and when you hear Norm explain things, you start to understand like why it's that way. Why Anime North acts a certain way. Like you get one point like that. Like listen to episode 11 if you really want to hear about our take on the whole Anime North debate when it comes to Canada and stuff. You hear both sides. You really do hear two different perspectives on the same issue from a visitor, and of course one of the key guys within Anime North itself. So it was a fascinating point. I did listen to Xanon's latest episode about Anime North, and there was one point that actually did come up that I thought I should ask right now a bit, and maybe we'll expand on it in the future so you guys can think about it a little further. We talked about the lack of corporate involvement with the show.
Yes.
Yeah, in Anime North.
But that has been forever.
That has been forever, but
For the fans, by the fans.
yeah.
Yep, and we remember all the stories, like with example in the early aughts with Bandai, and they were going to bring all these things, all that, and they said no. They didn't want them taking over the dealer's room.
That was fascinating to me, because for the longest time I thought, where is the company representation? And then I never really clued into that until your little banter with Norm.
Yeah, but then hearing that angle again on the Xanon show, Xanon Canada. Sorry, get the right name. In not so many words, there was this. He made me start thinking about has all this, because in many ways Anime North is the institution in Canada, right? We make that joke, the institution of anime fandom in Canada. So in many ways it really represents anime fandom in Canada specifically. Mm-hmm. So has this stance been to the detriment of Canadian fandom, to the point where the companies don't take Canada seriously as a market?
I wouldn't say that entirely. And the other counterpoint we could put to that is I think it's like Otakuthon in Montreal, where they took the spirit of Anime North, but you definitely see more company involvement on that, and they've done stuff with High Dive, which is Sentai and stuff like that, like a promo thing. They've done stuff with Faku, so Faku's been there a number of years and stuff like that. But
Faku's been up here once.
Yeah, well, they were actually over at Otafest in Calgary that month. Yeah, they were, but they have been to Montreal, I think, each year for the past 2 or 3 years. So that's an interesting one, and they haven't been to Anime North at all.
So Jacob makes the trip up there?
I'm not sure who makes the trip, to tell you the truth.
Okay. I know Jacob came up here
but I haven't been to Otakuthon that many times, so I can't remember who they're sending out. You know what I mean? Because they actually had a panel, and they actually had a booth in the dealer's room and stuff like that, like they normally would at some other conventions. Now, for the Calgary one, I think it was just a panel. I'm not sure if they had what they had there, because that one, I believe, is held on the University of Calgary campus, I believe.
Okay.
But I could still be wrong. They might have moved to a convention center.
Maybe sometimes we're also talking about crumbs. Canada, for as much as we love it,
we're small potatoes.
It's a small potato. So
we're
what's
basically
the point?
the size of state of California.
So really, we're not. So really, what's the point of saying talking about how viable a market Canada is?
And the other thing is international borders and stuff like that, which do affect. Like I know Mike Toll was talking again, is like trying to find the distributors to help them distribute in Canada, which is the biggest, toughest thing for them.
And he does talk at length about that actually.
And many of them have talked about that. Even Right Stuff talked about that when they finally did. Okay, we're going to make the deal with FedEx, and then they have a third party in Montreal helping them out with that, so that they can, if something happens, it goes and they deal with the people in Montreal and send it back or whatever. And the other thing is, we are charged the taxes, and then that way they don't have to worry as much about when Canada Post, sorry, not Canada Post, but Border Services looks at it, because everything is basically in order, and you should technically be paying your taxes anyway. So
that from the accountant. Okay. Well, there's I just want to lay that thought out before we move on. But yeah, as I said, if you get the chance to listen to the latest to the recent episode, and I'll put a link in to the Zan in Canada podcast episode that reviewed Anime North. It was a good listen. It was a good listen for an hour. And we're aiming to make this episode about as long.
Less than an hour. But it was kind of funny. I was thinking the next talk you were going to talk about a certain seminal show
that has been released.
Well, let's get on to that.
And then the reason why I'm thinking about it is we were having a Canada Day dinner. And so they had a band where we were and stuff like that. And then they were doing Frank Sinatra's Take Me to the Moon.
Fly Me to the Moon. Ooh.
Fly Me to the Moon. Sorry.
Way to go.
Fly Me to the Moon. And I can't help but think of, the first thing I thought of was not Frank Sinatra, but Ava, and how many younger people might think that way if they ever heard that, which is kind of in my mind. I'm blowing my mind.
Not the ones discovering Eva now.
Yeah, definitely not, probably.
For the first time.
Different experience.
Jeff Gregg has seen it, and he's posted a couple thoughts on it on Facebook. And I think we'll try and Skype with him when I learn Skype. Yeah,
when you learn Skype,
it's not that hard.
It's not that hard. I just got to give myself time, and it could be and let's try and talk with him on that a little longer. But yes, we did want to talk about about Evangelion's appearance finally on Netflix, and obviously, as many of you know,
what we found out is Netflix doesn't have as much money as they say they do.
Or no, or either that or they're just plain cheap. They just
have
selective.
the money.
They got money. It's just that they have to be. They have to be a bit selective, right? But that does lead to a lot of
it's interesting.
Question marks.
As I told you, I said we knew that the amount of money paid for that show probably was astronomical to Studio Kara, which probably is the ones holding it now compared to Gainax.
Oh, it's Kara now.
But the thing is, because they were overseeing the dub, they were overseeing everything. But you think if you're paying all that money, you should get pretty much everything, including like Fly Me to the Moon and the other. And that became such a big part of the show. As we said, they had albums of everyone under the sun singing that show, including a cut of Fly Me to the Moon, where the whole production staff was singing it. And they may not have been the greatest singers of that song, but they definitely had heart.
Yeah. Well, okay. So which leads to a lot of different points, and let's go through a few of those layers. I think no, that's not a drinking game today. First part was the dub itself, or the existence of the new dub, because there's always this talk about, okay, what became of the ADV dub? And I sent you guys that article just now. I read through some of it. What do we know about the status of the actual original ADV audio?
All we know is we don't have the contracts, and we don't know how those things, because remember, that was 95. That was one of the earlier dubs ADV did, and a lot of those early contracts for ADV and all the other companies, manga and all that stuff, some of them, they weren't standardized contracts, and some of them, the dub studio and the localization guys sometimes got to keep that. It wasn't the licensor. Sometimes the contracts.
I'm thinking that's the case for Evangelion.
Well, you remember.
But now with the standardization and that all of them have their international department,
yeah, there's a little bit
all
more
of them
tighter.
now basically come back to the licensor and stuff like that. They've airtight they made the contracts airtight.
So
Since
the remnants of
mid-2000s.
ADV still hold the. So in theory,
I'm not. It's a possibility among many. Let's put it that way.
yeah,
It's a possibility.
and let's play a thought, because remember in the days after the announcement, we heard from Tiffany Grant that starting that petition to have the ADV dub put into the Netflix version, which obviously isn't the case, and it's a well-known studio that did do it. Let's be clear about that.
But that,
Johnny Young
obviously-
Bosch.
But obviously, they would want that to be on there if that's the case. And they've worked with other people. Like, look at Gunsmith Cats. That was like one of their first dubs, and they allowed Robert Woodhead and Anime Ego to have that. And Robert Woodhead in the Kickstarter said that the former ADV people, John Lediford and Matt Greenfield, Tiffany Grant, all of them were like stars. Like, they helped them out trying to get all these extras, all the dub and all this stuff that they held. So it's definitely not for a lack of them holding back. That's for sure.
Yeah, they wanted that, and obviously, if and let's suppose the ADV still owns the audio, there's something in it for them, obviously, to have it in there.
But probably the more likely thing, and Kevin alluded to, is Studio Kara. This is their baby and stuff like that.
So
and
basically, they want to do ground up.
when they were doing the English dub, the new director of that one said they did a blind auditions, and then Kara was the one who selected all the dub voices and stuff like
It's
that.
funny. Well, one of the names that comes out is Johnny Young Bosch, who visited Fan Expo almost a decade ago.
The Black Power Ranger.
Right. No, was he?
He was.
Second
He was
second
one
Black,
of them.
second Black Ranger. Yes. He was. It's funny because this is the second time I know of he's been involved in a major
Bleach, right?
redub. No, he did. He was in the second dub of Akira as well.
right,
Akira.
right, yeah,
and that's
yeah.
obviously.
And I believe it was
Exactly,
in
yeah.
the second one of 5 centimeters per second.
Oh, really?
As
Yeah.
well, remember?
See, he seems
And
to
that
have
was the Bang Zoom one.
he seems to have a habit of being there the second time around, right? And he played Kaneda in Akira.
But he's an old hand, so.
Yeah, he's become old hand in 10 years. But I know I saw him listed. I forgot who he played.
Oh, he played the best friend of the fourth pilot.
Okay. So let's continue.
Toru? Oh.
Yeah. So so now that we've talked about the dub, let's talk about the translation, because obviously now there was a missed opportunity for us at Anime North, because Dan Kanemitsu was a guest of honor, and it wasn't really known. He did a couple panels. He actually did the panels on either end on the bookends of Fred's panels. The Fred's first panel on the Friday at Anime
And he has
North.
been definitely a big commentator on translation and stuff like that. He's done the Black Lagoon manga translation, and he's talked at length
Yes, he
about
has.
it.
And he did this. He did Evangelion, and I didn't know that until he got hammered on the internet over it.
Yeah,
And this is the talk. So where do we where
and
we're
there obviously was oversight probably from Studio Kara there again, if they were that hands-on with everything and stuff like that. But what are we to know about what it is anyway? Because basically Anno was in a blender for that whole series. So people are still debating on what is going on in that series to this day. So
yeah, it's probably, and Anno probably won't give you a straight answer.
because he was like fucking
What was
out
it?
of his mind,
What was-
depressed,
yeah,
and God knows what.
So what was the intent? Well, ask the director. The director
Ask him
probably,
in 1995.
But the problem
That's
is
like you get a
the
better
director.
answer.
It's entirely possible the director doesn't really know. Right? I mean, but because people are so upset. What's the phrase we used? What's the phrase?
Triggered, I guess?
Undermining,
Triggered?
or
I wanted to say
under,
triggered, because
not
that's
really
all the young
undermining,
kids
but downplaying. Downplaying, is that the word we use?
Yeah, like what did they downplay the implicit BL moments between Kaworu and Shinji?
Instead of
That's
I
what
love
people are
you,
upset
like,
about
or something
that,
like
yeah.
that. So, but Suki, the way they do Suki, there's so many variations and deeper meanings, all this other stuff. So that was kind of, I don't know.
But this is also assumes
It's splitting hairs, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it is a
Because
splitting hair
translation
thing
is
because-
an art. It's not a
It's-
thing,
and-
especially with our two languages.
and that's the
English
thing,
and
because
Japanese. Sorry.
that reminds me of something Zach Davison said once. He's the guy who translates Gigage no Gitaro as well as a lot of the yokai stuff. That when you're reading, let's say for the example of manga, when you're reading a translated manga, you're technically reading the translator's work. It's not really from the creator's mouth at that point.
And that's a fair statement.
That is
for a lot of people.
that is a very
Because
keen-
as they
I'd
go,
say bang on.
Because as
I'd
they
agree
go
with that.
deeper and stuff like that, like, and some of them like
And
are
that
just
led-
fluff stuff. It's like, okay, maybe it's not. But
that-
as you go deeper and deeper to certain series, yeah, it can change.
Yeah, and that led to Amanda Wynn Lee's lash out earlier this week, right? Mm-hmm. Know the language. Like I've had to deal with this for 2 decades because she was the one on the lead on the ADV translation.
Yeah, she was in the early ADV dubs and stuff
Yeah,
like that
and
when
she
they
says,
started out.
learn the damn language, and I think that's the fair statement.
Yeah, 100%.
And of course, that also assumes that ADV's
And then you'll still have those
ADV's
fights because
translation
some people
at the time was of the highest quality. The thing is, we were talking about something, an industry a part of the translation industry that was just really in its infancy. Not really infancy, but it's
And
certainly
remember, I think
a lot
some of
older than-
those were contractors that they started to get for ADV and stuff like that because they had to build up and stuff like that to get to their early aughts status where they had a lot of the stuff in-house for all their dubs, their translation, marketing, and everything.
So, well, what was your take on it, Mohamed? Just watching it because you've watched the entire.
Yeah, it's
series.
it's a much better watching experience. Netflix is amazing at that. So
How about the ending? People say it gave them a different feel
Oh, yeah.
than Fly to the Moon because they felt like it was more uplifting or something. I don't know.
the one good thing
And
about Netflix is the ability to skip forward through openings and
So
endings.
did they have the full one? Because sometimes with the way they're doing it now, they're getting rid of opening and endings, and they've been having that debate in Japan. So at that point, might as well just get rid of the ending.
Exactly. Who needs to see those credits, right?
Right.
But it was a smooth watch. The ending, the last 2 episodes, because I hadn't seen Ava in quite a while, and I'd forgotten about the ending. So it's like you're watching. Oh wow, that's jarring, abrupt ending.
Yeah,
And I feel like they were saying that they had issues with some of the other languages because they took down the Italian version. I heard.
Oh yeah, I remember when it first came out, there was like a whole bunch of options, and now it's like
So they took down.
I have
So
to
there
check my
definitely is
original.
some teething issues, but
yeah.
that's not too surprising because when you're trying to do those many dubs and all this stuff, like they must have been going a mile a minute. I feel
100%.
like
For the-
100%. Yeah.
Oh,
to get
boy.
all those languages, all those translations and stuff like that. It's not like you get one guy and somehow you're going to get all that stuff done.
Yeah, but I guess my point is also Dan Kanemitsu had been on the defensive, and I think unfairly over the way this has been, the way this has gone. I'll check that later.
Good segue.
Yeah, thank you. So it's just like I got into a talk with other friends about translation and stuff. Okay, hands up, show of hands, or just give me a thought. I only know one language. Just like
I know 1.5.
you know, 1.5. You can speak a little. What
My
what's your-
Cantonese is poor.
but at least your Cantonese is probably better than my English. So, James, Mohammed, do you know any other languages?
James, do you know other languages?
No.
Obviously, we're just Anglophones. Stupid Anglos, as the Quebecois call us.
So,
Or ways.
like,
Oh!
well, we're just no.
Why
but-
don't we apply- so why don't we
You
apply
know,
to
he
one of
might
you?
take you to the Human Rights Board. Mo might take you there. He's
sure,
gonna
man, I might,
take
yeah.
all your money, Kevin. Oh man.
That applies to one of you.
well,
Well, you won't have any money. So.
context is like when in talking with my friend on this one, she just said, learn another language because it opens up a whole bunch of doors. Not necessarily in terms of actual opportunities, but what type of perspectives you get. I remember, and we just passed the first anniversary of Anthony Bourdain's death. One of the interviews that he had in the course of Parts Unknown that stuck out to me was of Barack Obama when he interviewed him in Vietnam, when he sat with him in that Vietnamese
Noodle,
restaurant.
yeah, the noodle.
Obama just said, Americans should know what it's like to travel. They really should use those passports. They should really have a passport and use it.
And they
then
don't.
get
A
to
lot of them
see it.
don't have passports compared to other places in the world. It's
I don't
crazy.
get that. I never understood that. That passport is literally like it's just so like it's just
I mean, I'll check that. But I mean,
So
you're
what?
going to Europe a
right.
bit.
Like, context. My cousin, she lives in the States, and I drove her to Buffalo because she was flying out of Buffalo. The drive in, it was me and her, and the minute they saw her American passport, it was like, oh, American, get on in there. You know, no questions asked. It's more of a thing where like you're automatically seen as like a pre-vetted individual, right? There's no like worry. You got an American passport.
Interesting.
Do you see it in an opposite way there, Kevin?
Sorry?
Do you see it in an opposite way there, Kevin?
No, I've usually not had problems.
Yeah.
But a passport's a great thing to have. So
Exactly.
And I guess
And it's easier now than ever, at least for us, because now they have the 10-year passports.
Yeah.
And they
Well,
have the
for me,
I have
so
a
good.
10-year.
like I have a
Yeah,
passport.
I have a 10-year as well.
So do I, man.
I have a passport.
And if you do the
too,
pre-vetting ones, then you're good, because
yeah,
there's
obviously-
now pre-vetting. It used to be you had to do the full 9 yards.
I mean, I had obviously I have a passport too. And my thinking is this is like I don't travel as much as I would like to, but one of the reasons that the hang-ups for me is I'd be so embarrassed not to know the language of the places I'm visiting.
What?
Seriously.
it's
That's part of it.
fine.
That's
Okay.
a little bit of it.
You
for me.
can get your way through. Trust me, there are ways.
I mean,
Oh yeah. Like
So
I
what
mean,
you
I
do
have
then-
like by my own admission, when I go to Montreal, whenever I go to Montreal,
Yeah, yeah.
and obviously it's a very bilingual city, but
Yes.
I come away from there feeling guilty. I don't know French.
I concur. It's the same anywhere you go.
Because I mean,
I
I mean,
have to deal with people from Quebec now,
No,
and
but-
somehow I've worked my way around,
Oh, no,
and
but-
away we go.
but the thing is, like in many ways, and I work in the service industry. I mean, you feel guilty about it. You have people there who are trying to help you
Right.
as a tourist, and if you're polite about it, they will, reciprocate.
Mike, if you go to a place that speaks English, then this isn't a problem.
Ooh, yes, I get that part too.
You can go to the UK, you can go to the States, you can go to Hong Kong,
You can go to
South
Australia,
Hong Kong,
New
I guess I
Zealand.
suppose.
you can go to
But-
South Africa.
Yes, but the Holy Grail is always visiting places like, for us as fans, Japan, or in
I
my
think
case,
you can
yes,
still
it
go
is.
to Japan because
or in
their
my- because-
infrastructure
no,
is.
but they're obviously because they want tourists these days.
Well, no, it improved. Remember with the World Cup, that's when it started, and
And
a lot of the stuff. And
with
now they're
Tokyo-
going
and then
into
of course the
overdrive
Olympics.
again because
Because
of
of
the
the
Olympics.
Olympics.
So now they're in overdrive again.
And for me also,
definitely
I
the
have to
greater
make-
Toronto, greater Tokyo area, you would definitely be fun. And
and
Osaka
and,
all
and
the
for
other-
me also there's a personal trip probably sometime into the future because I've been encouraged to visit my parents' homeland in the Philippines and visit my and I talked about my family in that
Before or
interview.
after they changed the name? Before or after they changed the name?
Which name? The Philippines?
Yeah. Didn't you guys hear? He's going to change the name of the country?
Oh,
oh god,
I gotta
Really?
gotta see this
Yeah, he
article.
wants to make it something more traditional or something. It was a while back, but yeah, he's in
Gotta
the
read
process
this.
of changing the name.
Duterte. You're referring to the president Duterte.
Exactly.
No comment. Okay. The thing is, I talked a little bit about my family in the Fred Schott interview because I referred to my grandfather in that interview and how his experiences may have been a lot like Yoshitaka Kiyama, Henry Kiyama's the four immigrants man, right? Because he had because that manga is partly his experience, but his experience sounded a lot like my grandfather's. Right. So I want to visit. So there are family graves I want to visit in the Philippines sooner rather than later. Once again, back to the translation. That's at the heart of this discussion, I guess. So, what do we say about this, or is this as stupid as the Vic Mignogna discussion now? Because I think it is, because it's getting that way for me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely taking on that tone and stuff like that. It's definitely just that initial disappointment, especially with the music and all this other stuff. And you're thinking that way, of course, because Netflix has been making this push and they've been making the push in Japan and stuff like that with that guy getting all these anime studios on side. And they're definitely getting them on side because they've been living like show to show and stuff like that. And now they're getting like, oh, I can just get a big paycheck now. And so Studio Wit, IG,
Basically, allowing
Bones, all the
these
premier guys
relicenses,
are
yeah.
basically going to Netflix or some of the other places. Like Amazon has Vinland Sagas with them for these next 2 seasons.
Actually, okay,
That's the
really?
only- yeah,
Let's talk
Amazon
ab-
Prime.
You want to still we'll talk a bit more about this story later on another time because you kind of hit something for me, and I guess this is the last part. And well, the translation story is the translation story. I think many of us know listeners out there know where many of us stand on it. And as I said, you can't. It's nice to like. It's just hard to depend on translations. Like it's nice. Translations are cool and all, and it's great that people do the work. But
But it's
like you
apples
said-
and oranges.
Well, Kevin actually said it made it a good point. You're listening, you're reading, you're enjoying the work of the translator, not necessarily the author. I think that's a telling thing to say. That's a really good point. I actually agree. That's a keen
I'm just-
observation.
And we've seen versions in gaming and in anime where we've picked up certain aspects of the language and we hear one thing and see another thing on the screen for the subtitles.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just surprised that it's not like standardized that like you should go to the source to get the translation, right? The translator should be talking to the creator to figure out, is this being translated like this, or do you mean this, or do you
but
mean
sometimes,
that?
but then once
it's
again,
like-
it comes down to like somebody like I don't know. Well, it's hard to sometimes it's hard to tell the intent.
True.
But the other part is, remember, this time around they
It's-
had a lot more say in it. Right?
Yeah, more
That
say-
sometimes happens.
Yeah.
And it's the other thing you say that, but remember for maybe Netflix, because they're doing and they're getting everything together, it's easier for that, but it's harder with things like Crunchyroll and Funimation because they're like go, 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 and speed,
Well, yeah.
speed.
True.
And so they have to get them out the door. And so they're doing that. And then they do the brush ups for the physical
Kind of like
releases. You know what I mean?
Kind of like
Just
me
the
with
Japanese
kind of like me with
uncut
episode 10 of Anime Roundtable. So,
Yeah, you've been cracking the whip on us today, haven't you?
well, something like that.
Yeah. A little less ums and ahs.
So I guess we'll come back to this. It's just, as I said, it's just that type of story, and
Now, all the
maybe it would be
stories,
nice
lots
to know
of food
Japanese.
for thought.
Yeah, it is
definitely
food
later.
for thought, and I guess we can talk about it another time. Okay, before we end today, and we have about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
James and I are planning to do a digest after Anime Expo finishes, because we're taping this in the midst of Anime Expo, in the middle of an Overwatch game between Toronto and Atlanta.
Which we are tied for some reason.
What?
Yeah.
Toronto actually got a map?
Yeah.
Okay. So, AX is ongoing, and I know maybe there's at least one thing. We'll go a little bit more at length about what's come out of AX, because there's been stuff.
Why don't we
So,
have a little
one-
pointer and ask both of them one thing?
Give me one thing. Mohamed, Kevin, give me one thing that's already had your attention from the AX news, if there's anything. Because
I mean, the Kira news is pretty big. But I guess you guys are going to go into that.
we'll go into
more.
that a little bit more. And I know
then,
that's a dive. but that-
Orbital Sun, like he had a whole panel for Otomo and going back to his previous works, but Orbital Sun, it's crazy. Only his third feature film after Steam Boy and Akira. Think about that.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Yes.
And the other thing is he talked about the weirdness of it, that it's an American character in space and all this stuff and a bit of fantasy element, but the spacesuit he's wearing has the Russian like space agency thing on it. And he's like, yeah, I know that's very weird.
yeah. Okay. So, Akira. Kevin, anything that
For
caught your
me,
attention?
it's
just one thing.
It's Dark Horse's announcements. So
Oh man, you
they-
stole my thunder, buddy! You stole my
Come on,
thunder.
Kevin. Come on,
man.
Kevin.
James and I know we'll go at length, but
So-
just one thing that
It was
quickly caught your
the
attention.
Dragonhead creators. One of his works is coming out, and the
Kurosaki Corpse
Corpse
Delivery
Delivery
Service.
Service.
But the problem is we're going to have to buy an omnibus, which has 2 volumes we already have.
well, better than it not.
Well, they
being
did this
around.
before, remember? Where they said, we're returning, you have to buy them. I bought them. Now I'm going to have to buy them again to support, but I will do it because Kurosaki Corpse Delivery Service, everyone either go to a library, read a bit of it, you'll enjoy it. It's like basically Scooby-Doo, mature Scooby-Doo is what I want.
Whoa,
to call it.
yeah.
Mature Scooby-Doo.
I was buying at one point, but then because I had a feeling that they weren't going to continue it,
They've had that, I know, but it's
that's
still...
why I sold my copies. But
Oh, those are the
I'll-
good volumes too, with the cardboard. You know, the
yeah,
original covers.
I'll probably get the library to make a purchase if you know what I mean. But no Eden, so I don't care otherwise.
Okay.
Nah, I think Eden's in the
Eden's
dustbin,
dead.
but you never know. They love that one, so maybe one day they might do. They have an omnibus that one, so that's still.
So
out there,
the
you know.
thing with Eden was that so long as we have enough money to just throw at Eden, we'll put it out. But that's been 5 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, but a lot of the omnibuses, the only thing, as we said, is a lot of them are those free volumes. So that's why some, like if it had been 2 volumes, we would have been fine. But definitely I'm going to support that. They talked again about what is Michael or whoever, the cat manga, which is going to be 2 volumes. That one's going to be a good one, even though it's flipped. But that's an older one they had in, was it Super Manga Magazine is the one they did back in the So I would hope maybe they'll get some of their back catalog. You never know. Like Club 69, I think it was.
Oh, Club 9? Ooh.
Club 9. Sorry,
69.
I said 69.
No way to go,
yeah. hey,
Freudian slip, right?
It's pretty close. It's just a 9 in there.
Quickly, one thing, and I know we'll go more at length later, hopefully later in the week. Just one thing quick, briefly.
Well, there was that kickoff, but then the other one that we'd have to talk on length, and we will touch on in the digest maybe, but later with Mo and Kevin, is Crunchyroll's new partner, which is Viz Media. Stuff like that.
That one.
And that one's a big one. And that one, we're not too surprising because remember, owned by Warner for Crunchyroll, and Warner was distributing Viz Media forever and stuff like that. The only thing on the Canadian side is it's going to be more expensive because Funimation's still been doing really good on pricing. They've still been American, and then you get a bit of a discount, stuff like that from Amazon or Best Buy. But Viz, it's hit or miss. Sometimes they'll have some things in Walmart you might be able to get a good price, but all the stuff on Amazon and that has been higher priced now and stuff like that, even though they've been with Warner forever. So it'll be interesting to see how it standpoint comes across the border. Special editions, they don't have as many, so you pay a bit more, and I'm sure they'll want to do some special editions and stuff like that on top of the normal editions. So we'll see how it goes with that partnership.
And on that note, the one that has my attention is the other side of the divorce. Funimation has agreed to some sort of partnership with Right Stuff. So,
well, that's actually just a normal streaming one. So basically, Right Stuff.
So this
trying to expand their
extensive.
reach. So they've done stuff where they put it on their YouTube channel. They've got it where they've put it on Crunchyroll. They've got it where they've put it on other streaming services.
God.
So they put it on.
Okay, so is this breaking news?
So I didn't realize Harmony Gold was able to renew their Macross license.
Yeah, that was a big news.
Fucking hell!
Yeah, the original 3.
Well, I want to let this one digest. We'll talk about
it's
this
already
a little more.
digested.
No,
it,
because
so
this is kind of interesting because what does it mean for the Macross franchise in North America again?
Well, everything else is free game, but those 3 that they originally had, they're still where they were before, unfortunately.
Yeah,
so.
and that's another topic for another day.
It's just going to be the same old, as they say, right?
And we are approaching the hour, like I said we would. So, and then after the ums and ahs come out, it'll probably be another 5 minutes off.
But no, the Right Stuff one, yeah, that's normal, and they're just expanding their reach with getting and I feel like they had some before on their old like streaming site and stuff like that for Funny, but I think with this one the more interesting thing was
it's basically
Funimation
like
does a lot
update.
more dubs, so I wouldn't be surprised if on top of the subtitle version, which is the only one Crunchyroll or a lot of others have, they might have the dubbed version of some of their older shows on there too.
I'm upset now.
We got a
perfect time to end
the show. Then the studio will be left intact.
Such bullshit. Oh, God.
This is how it ends, Mike.
Yes,
this show will end with Kevin destroying us all.
It's kind of, which is kind of nice. Which is kind of nice to end it.
What is Tatsunoko smoking? Oh my God! And can I have some?
Couple grams, like a joint or two.
Just remember, this is what companies care about.
Cash rules everything around me. Get the money. $dollar bill, y'all. Right.
They got to get their strippers and their hookers somehow.
What money do they even have? How are they even earning any money nowadays? I'm not even joking. It's a serious question.
Anyway.
It's called
what have they done in the last 10 years?
It's called investment. They took the money they earned and they have it in some very good investments.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, as I said, it's been since, when was the last time we were in here taping? It's been like since March.
Mm-hmm. We were at your parents' place last time.
Yeah, we were at my parents in Mississauga to take.
And we were watching the Raptors on the way to what we figured was them never winning a championship.
On that note,
it turned around.
On that note, and they did. And then when we
because we didn't do any tapings after that.
Yeah, and then we taped. And then when we taped at Anime North. The Raptors have just won the Eastern Conference, and now we're taping today on this day. Well, we're champions, but we just lost.
The Kawhi watch is over.
Kawhi
watch is over.
You guys did it, man. You scared him off. Like you guys.
Yeah, way to go, CP. Way to go, CP24, and all.
So Kawhi is a Clipper, and Danny Green is a Laker.
That could be great.
And no one cared about Danny Green anyway.
That's hilarious.
True. I mean, he was going to leave regardless.
Anyway, that's just the way it goes. Hey. Trade was worth it. They got their champion.
It was good while it lasted.
Well, now the interesting thing is we talked about before is They only have 2 people under contract the next year. So this will be the first time that Bobby Webster and Masai Ujiri, they have like all the cards to build the team, because they basically made that they were going to get rid of everyone. And then somehow magic happened after that Sacramento trade many moons ago.
Yeah.
And to the people who thought he let us on, shut up.
Well,
Just shut up.
Well, the only thing for me, my only thing I'll say about it is, well, Toronto was the beneficiary of somebody wanting to come home a year ago when John Tavares came.
So
Exactly.
when they visit the Parliament Hill, is he going to come back for that? Like, what's going to happen?
Who knows?
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. But, you know, it was cool. It was great while it lasted. And hey, as I said, championship, nobody can take that away.
And we kept our, we were held high and stuff like that, at least on the Raptors MLSE side, because they were very respectful. They kept him healthy. They kept him happy. They won a championship.
Hey. Oh my
So
God.
on all that side, that was fine. It was just
It was a fun
a
win.
few of the fans at the end were just a bit excessive. That's all.
Yeah, way to go.
It's like we
way to
just
go.
couldn't even
Once
see
again,
down
way
their
to go
balls. It's
CP24. Okay. I know, not anime related, but hey, we're a Toronto show. Anyway, that's it. I think we're done. Because there's really not
Can't
much
believe
else.
it. We're never going to tape again? That's great.
Yeah, well, assuming... Well, after we piece together whatever Kevin just destroys in the next couple minutes. Okay, so... as I said, thanks for... well, thanks for you guys for bearing with me on doing this episode. So thanks a lot. Great to be back in the 6 Point studio again.
Yeah, no, great to have the conversation, as we said, and we had a lot to digest and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's
and
like the discussion is
there's-
always welcome.
The discussion's always welcome, yeah. And, you know, to listeners out there, or whatever number we have, you can add to the discussion as well. AnimeRoundtable@gmail.com is our email address. @AnimeRoundtable is our Twitter handle.
Follow us on Twitter, guys.
Yeah.
I hate you too, Tatsunoko. It's all your fault too.
Okay.
They don't listen to the show, Kevin.
No,
Give
they
it
don't
up.
listen. Okay. Also, what is it? What's the other part? Yeah, www.animeroundtable.com. You know the addresses. Hopefully, James and I will have a chance later this week to talk a little bit more about Anime Expo, okay? Stay tuned for that. But until then, that's it. Thanks for listening. Join us again for another edition of the Anime Roundtable.